G'day everyone, welcome to episode 143 of the Trademate Sports Betting Podcast. Today I'm joined by professional sports bettor Neel Shah. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. Say good evening, good morning. I don't know what bloody time it is over there for you, man. I lose track, but yeah.
It's about to hit 8 a.m. and what is it, 10 o'clock over there, mate,
nice.
at night. So
yeah,
we're in two different days. Who would have thought?
crazy.
Technology, it's incredible, isn't it?
Same shit, different day.
All right, so today we are, as most of you probably know, I'm not really working for Trademate anymore, but I thought it would be fun every now and then to do a little podcast. So instead of, getting someone on that I've never really met before, or you guys listening to someone that's completely new to the podcast, which I love doing, it's great, but it just takes a lot of my time having to, reach out to people, research them, come up with questions, and this is just a lot easier for me, and it gets you guys some content. So I guess my plan with this is to every now and then jump on the podcast, the YouTube channel, get a podcast out for you guys, and I guess talk about more general kind of betting stuff with the likes of Neil, and maybe we can get someone like Anthony to come back on, Ryan, Jonas, the list goes on of people that have, that I would call basically mates at this point. So, yeah, just makes it a lot easier for me, less time consuming, and you guys get a podcast here and there, which I hope you enjoy. But yeah, unfortunately, you have to see Neil a lot more often.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Not much I can do about
it. So yeah, today come up with a few topics. Myself, I'd love to talk about bankroll growth today. And then Neil and I have kind of been talking here and there over the last couple of weeks, and a couple of things we've just been chatting about is staking, and then also Neil's got some, I would say, a very interesting point of view on tracking bets, which I think will provide a really good discussion, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So we saved all of our kind of back and forth talking about this on Telegram and saved it for the podcast. So this should be lots of fun, mate. Do you want to start with bankroll growth, which is one of the things that I wanted to talk about today? As someone that doesn't have a big bankroll, so I mean, my bankroll is about 40,000 Australian dollars, which a lot of people would say is a lot of money, but in terms of like your professional sports bettors, a lot of people have a bankroll of hundreds of thousands. So it's in the scheme of things, it's not a very big bankroll. My biggest issue that I have nowadays is I want my bankroll to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, essentially means you don't have to place as many bets. You can really hone in on one sport or one league, if you know what I mean. Like, you can really just become really good at one thing, and because you're betting so much money on it, the whole like making enough money, getting enough turnover in isn't really an issue anymore. That's my ultimate goal. But at the same time, as a full-time bettor, you need to make money too and put it into your actual bank account, and not be not just everything you make from sports betting, all your profits, turning that into just expanding your bankroll. Like, you need to take some money out so you can feed the family in a way, or pay rent, if you get what I mean. So my biggest question around this for you, mate, is I guess what's your process nowadays? You've been doing this for well over a year now. What do you have any kind of process as to, you make a certain amount of money, you put it in your bank account, or do you dedicate it to having a bigger bankroll?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will have their own sort of methods of doing it. For myself personally, I mean, I kind of started out separating bank accounts, keeping kind of the betting bank separate. But again, like you say, we have expenses, you know. So for me, when I was in Qatar, the overheads were actually pretty high, you know, in terms of again, you know, sort of paying for rent, you know, paying for you know, just day-to-day living. And also, you know, again, if you're subscribing to lots of things, you know, if you're fortunate enough, you know, if you create your own models, if you kind of do your own work, and you don't necessarily need to do all that. But for me, it's kind of that investment of you know, subscription services, which save a lot of time. They're worth you know, the time is worth more than the expense. So yeah, it's a challenge. So every month I know kind of roughly what my kind of minimum expenditure needs to be. So I don't have necessarily a profit target that I hit, but I kind of ideally want to be making that as a minimum, or at least, let's say, over a 3-month period, you know, to kind of comfortably, pay all of that. So at this point, it's kind of mixed in, because again, we just through personal circumstance, so we've moved countries. There's been a lot of expenses, you know, just kind of traveling back. Now my daughter's in nursery. You know, bloody cost of fuel, which was like, you know, a couple of quid in Qatar, and it's like a hell of a lot more here. So that's a kind of practical challenge. What I found is kind of bankroll growth was if not rapid, but, you know, quicker, definitely in the first year. And although there can be times where it's bigger now, there's limitations. You know, there are caps on these markets. This isn't the financial markets. You know, there's only so much, especially, you know, if you got that kind of top tier football or cricket, you know, or the major horses sit down. You know, at the soft books, there's only so much you can stake. So even when you do have a huge edge, a lot of times you can't maximize it, and so bankroll growth won't be as fast as you know, in an ideal scenario, in a theoretical scenario. So yeah, I mean, it is definitely a challenge. And I think we mentioned before, let's say, you know, just on Trademate stuff, you know, I think I kind of rolled over my bankroll about 7 times. But then it got absolutely decimated. So I've kind of had to kind of claw back from there. And yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, like you've said before, other guests have said as well, it's the issue, once you kind of understand the betting theory, and you know, you've done a bit of research, and you know, again, listen to all these podcasts, it's not finding the value, it's actually getting the bets down to maximize that growth. And that becomes a challenge, I think, where probably a lot of people will hit a ceiling. So I'll give you an example. Like, you know, now I'm doing you know, doing a lot of shop betting. You know, if you win more than £1,000 on an individual bet on a horse race, if the potential payout is more than 1,000, they generally need to flag it up. They need to call their head office, you know, their risk management team. So obviously, if you keep doing that, they're going to kind of clock onto you. You're less likely to prolong your experience there. So that's again, a compromise you need to make. Obviously, if you've got, you know, let's say 2 or 3 Paddy Powers in the same town, you could kind of hammer all of them, but then prices might change before you get to all of them. That might just flag you up even more, because, you know, they can recognize your handwriting and all kinds of stuff like that. So again, you know, sometimes there's huge boosts. Today, example of there was a Georgia-Sweden game, big edge on that on William Hill, but, you know, the max stakes you can get is 50 quid on that. So unless you've got dozens of accounts, or you can hit lots of shops to get that, it's going to be slow. You know, even with all the best edges in the world, it's going to be kind of slower than ideal.
Yeah. So you don't really have a set system at the moment where you go, I don't know, maybe every month you look at your bankroll and go, all right, I've made $10,000 this month, 5,000 goes towards the bankroll, and 5,000 goes into my pocket for, you know, rent, food, holidays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, basically, I kind of, you know, what needs to be deducted gets deducted, you know, as but I do kind of, you know, look at my profits, and I try to put, let's say, 10% of any profit made in a quarter. So I try not to go by month. because, you know, I can have sort of big swings month to month. So I like to kind of, you know, let's say over a 90-day period, that smooths out some of the variance. And so what I do is, again, I try and diversify some of that. So, you know, I invest in crypto, so I kind of side into, you know, the crypto. I'm investing a little bit of the betting profit back into that, or a lot of the time the money kind of keeps getting recycled, you know, into other accounts. Again, you know, kind of running accounts, helping people out with that. So it can be hard to keep track of, because I'm not the most organized of people either. So that is a challenge. But yeah, I don't set sort of specifics on that, but that's something definitely I want to look into, like, for next year. But I mean, what about yourself? Like, how do you kind of, do you have a kind of targets in mind, or?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the main reason I brought this up is because I just don't really have a system at the moment, and I think I could. And it's one of those things I think about, like, do I want to, you know, in a year's time, 2 years' time from now, do I still want to have a $40,000 bankroll and just, I don't know, just keep it going the way I am, like not making as much money, but then at least like everything that I make is going into my, you know, and maybe that's almost like a better life in a way, if you get what I mean. Like if you're constantly just trying to grow your bankroll and you're not taking much away for your actual bank account, then is that a great lifestyle? Yeah, it's probably going to be a grind for a period of time if you're just in reinvesting everything that you make, because your life quality is not really getting better. But yes, you're growing a bankroll. So, I mean, one of the thoughts that I've had recently is like, what if I just, like, you know, sacrifice my life quality essentially for like a year or so, and only take out the money that's going to pay for food, rent, all this kind of stuff, and, you know, other expenses, and then reinvest everything else. So, you know, you might not be able to go to bloody Spain on a holiday or whatever, or or whatever. But at least, like, if you just grind out the next couple of years, you could take that 40 grand to 100 grand or something like that. And next thing you know, like, you're operating with 100 grand bankroll. And then maybe at that point, you can operate with 100 grand bankroll for like the rest of your betting career, and everything that you make from that goes straight into your back pocket. And I mean, if you're getting lots of turnover in off that kind of bankroll, like, you know, and you got a decent ROI, like you're gonna have a good life. Like you're gonna be earning way over minimum wage. So,
But what would stop you from, so let's say you say, all right, I want to get 100K bankroll, but what would stop you once you have that 100K bankroll from saying, actually, you know what, I want to have a 200K bankroll, I want to get to 500, I want to have $1 million bankroll? Because because I suppose that's where everyone's different, and everyone they'll have their own sort of target. I guess, let's say, you know, if you're saving for a house, or you want to retire early, you know, people have, you know, there's different standards of living, and people are going to be listening to this in different parts of the world, right? So, you know, let's say I live in London, and I mean, it's just mental, you know, like just the cost of living here. So the target you'd need would be quite significant. But like you say, you know, it's quality of life thing. Some people, you know, that you know, it's the kind of the money takes over everything. But you know, I'm kind of like you know, I think life is also to be enjoyed. And if you're doing this, the whole point, I think a lot of us are doing this. Whole point, a lot of people listening to this, they want to escape this kind of 9 to 5 grind, or they kind of, you know, maybe, you know, want to be their own boss and work less ultimately. But I think that's the danger, you know. And I'm sure, I mean, let's say out, you know, all the guests that you've spoken to on the podcast, I mean, let's say, how many hours a week would you say they work on average? Let's say if you sort of, you know, let's say out of all the guests that you've spoken to as an average.
I mean, I feel like a lot. I feel like a lot of the people that I talk to, like, work way more than your average 9 to 5 worker would. Like, you know, most people work 40 hours a week, but I mean, I feel like most sports bettors, professional sports bettors, work way over that. And I mean, you can almost, because a lot of them are working on Saturdays and Sundays, like that's, you know, if you're working a normal job on a Saturday and Sunday, you get pay and a half or double time or whatever. So you can almost like look at that and say, well, you know, maybe they only work 30 hours Monday to Friday or whatever. But because they're working 30 hours then on the weekend, like that's almost like a, you know, double time that and a half, because, you know, that's your weekend. Then, you know, maybe it's roughly averages out to, you know, 70 hours or something like that. So
Yeah, and these are people with huge bankrolls as well, right? So in
yeah.
theory, they don't necessarily need to do it, but I think that's where it's kind of hard to put a stopping point, because if you're good at it and you enjoy it, you know, it doesn't feel like work. But also, once you're used to a certain kind of if you set these expectations, you know, of what you kind of need to, not even what you need to live on, but what you want to generate each month, it's kind of hard to kind of drop back or just kind of settle for, you know, okay, this is enough, and I'll just kind of, you know, go with this.
Mm. And then there's the other argument of like you could just grind for 10 years, let's just say, and have a huge bankroll, work 60, 70 hours a week, sacrifice basically 10 years of your life. Or maybe you just love sports betting and you know, this is just a, I mean, I like sports betting, but I don't want to be doing it 70 hours a week. And
Yeah,
then, you know, at the end of, you know, 10 years, you don't have to work anymore for the rest of your life, basically. I mean, I would say an example of that is, I mean, I don't know how much money he's made, but like Jonas, you know, he grinded hard for like, I don't know when he started, probably like, you know, maybe 7, 8 years ago, something like that. And he worked extremely hard for years and years and years, and now he's at the point where he's moved to Thailand and he's kind of taking it easy now and not putting as many hours in. But you know, maybe that's another strategy in itself. I guess we're highlighting here is that you can set a period of time where you kind of sacrifice everything, but the long-term goal is like by the time you're 30 or 35 or 40, for the rest of your life, you don't have to worry about it anymore, and you can just, you know, basically be retired.
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's different ways, absolutely. It's just whatever suits your situation. And I suppose the other thing is, you know, how much are you making from betting? Like, you know, what is your yield? Kind of, you know, what is your ROI? And at a certain point, let's say if you do make enough, you know, could you invest it into property? You know, invest it into rental property, for example. And you know, as much fun as it is, we know about variance. We know that, you know, you could have brutal days, brutal months. I suppose all of us would want something kind of maybe something secure in the background, and that's why a lot of people, even though they could go full time, they don't. They choose not to, even though they have the skills. Again, for that kind of security. So, I mean, definitely, you know, that's one way of looking at it, is diversifying. So I think that's something I kind of look at in terms of profits that I take out. I don't necessarily, you know, there's a little bit, you know, going towards, you know, a holiday every now and again. You know, if there's a big win, if there's a kind of, you know, a better than average month, me personally, you know, I'd want to, instead of investing all of it back into the bankroll, I do want to take some out. I do want to, you know, treat my family, have a nice time, enjoy life a little bit, because ultimately that's why I'm doing it. You know, it's not about, you know, to kind of 24/7 grind all the time. It's because then it's just replacing hard work, you know, 9 to 5 with an employer where you get a pension and you get other benefits, but
Yep.
you end up working far more. So it's a fine balance, definitely. But I think definitely, you know, what we were saying as well about market caps, you know, that's the other challenge. You
Yeah.
know, I think, you know, with yourself, with me, with others as well, there's strategies where potentially you could make a limitless amount of money, but bookmaker restrictions get in the way, you know, market limits get in the way, liquidity gets in the way. So again, it's just trying to find that balance.
Yeah. Mate, I feel like we haven't really come up with any answers for anyone. We
Yeah,
haven't come to
yeah,
any
sorry about
conclusion, but I think
that.
that just shows that, like, yeah, we both haven't really figured this out yet. I think maybe if we could give anyone some like parting advice on this topic, it's just, maybe come up with a plan, like come up with some kind of plan or goals, like how you want to go about this. Do you want to sacrifice a period of your life for long-term gain? Do you want to just have a smaller bankroll and have a greater life quality, but you're still kind of half grinding for the rest of your life? You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, maybe we can come up with plans for ourselves over the coming months and get back to everyone and see what we've come up with. But at the moment, yeah, at least for myself, and it sounds like you too, it's very much like taking it how it comes, and kind of, for me at least, it's basically just 50-50-ish, kind of like putting enough in my bank account so that I can have a little bit of fun and pay all the bills, but then reinvesting the other half into sports betting and having a bigger bankroll.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I would add to that is probably there's a book on my reading list. There's many now, but there's a new one by Joseph Buchdahl, you know, like a really respected mind in betting. And that does talk about kind of, you know, different Monte Carlo simulations and you know, how you might manage your bankroll growth. And that's something definitely I want to look at. Maybe for another podcast, Alex, we could do maybe a review of the book when I finally get around to reading it.
Is that
as well. So
Monte Carlo or Bust? Is that what it's called?
that's the one. Yeah.
He's only just brought that out, right?
Yeah, I think it's his latest book, so that's something definitely to look at. And yeah, if anyone's listening to this, that'd be worth a read. It's kind of relevant to the topic we're talking about.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, yeah, that's a great idea, mate. We can do that one day. The problem is I'll probably never read it because I can never be fucked reading anything in my life when I've been staring at a computer all day.
Yeah, you just take the cliff notes from the chat. It's all good.
My goal is to read one book a year, and the only time I'll ever do that is
one a year.
If I can read one book a year. Well, mate, I cannot stand reading when I mean, I spend hours and hours looking at a computer screen all day. All I want to do is when I'm finished, I don't want to use my eyes anymore, basically. I want to give them a rest.
I could lend you some of my daughter's books, like, you know, the Very Hungry Caterpillar or something. You get your quota in quite easily.
Yeah. All right. Next one, tracking bets. This will be fun because I'm going to give you the floor, mate, because essentially about maybe 2 weeks ago or something, you told me that you have stopped tracking bets. Now, this is hugely controversial, and it makes for a very good topic of conversation. So I think we should just start off with you and explain why you have stopped.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a politician's answer here. So, right. So for some things that I do, I've stopped tracking altogether. And the reasons for this, and I did give this a lot of thought. And let's say when I first started off, you know, I was tracking everything, was using, you know, like an online tool to track the bets, closing lines where I could find them. And for the Euros as well, I was, you know, making sure I was keeping a record because I was giving tips out to people. I wanted it to be transparent. But let's say, you know, some of the things that are the most profitable for me, I don't track them anymore because really for practical reasons, it just takes a lot of time. And theoretically, yes, it's great to be able to do it. But, you know, right now, you know, I mentioned before the pod, so you know, my daughter hasn't been well, so I have to pick her up from nursery in the afternoon. I get maybe 2 or 3 hours in the morning to myself. And then, you know, the evening from like 8 o'clock onwards until I go to bed. So actually I get maybe, you know, 6 hours, 7 hours, not because I don't want to work more, but that's all I have, you know, at the moment. So tracking everything, recording it, all the admin would take up, you know, a fair percentage of that time. And although it's important, it's really useful. I've basically, you know, kind of made the decision not to for a lot of things. But one of the reasons is for particular things is they're already being recorded. So, you know, there are sites that I use where they have data going back years of all the markets. And obviously I'm not necessarily on all of those bets, but it gives me a good overall picture of whether their model, whether their methodology is profitable over time, and whether it will. Well, you can't say for sure, but realistically, it should be profitable in the future. So that gives me a good barometer of confidence that I don't necessarily need to do all that work. In a way, I'm replicating the work that someone else is already doing, and they're probably doing it even better than I am because they're more organized than me. They've got Excel spreadsheets, or they've got Python scripts to pull all this data. So that's something that again I've kind of forsaken. With the American horse racing, for example, there's a sample of almost 20,000 bets that have been kind of recorded over a, I think, 2-year period. So I don't feel the need to, let's say, my hundreds of bets, or in the small thousands. I suppose what kind of use that is to me, because the other thing is, in the betting world, in betting circles, we are encouraged to think about this. We are encouraged to track bets, to kind of record our bets, to do all this. But the question I have to ask a lot of people, because I'm guilty of this, is I have recorded a lot of stuff, but how often do you actually look at it? How often do you review it? How often do you kind of play around with the data? Because if you're just recording for recording's sake, it can be a waste of time. If you are recording it, there needs to be a good reason, or there needs to be a good use for it. So if you are spending the time doing the admin to do it, then you should also spend that time each month to actually go over it, review it, play around with it, see where you might have gone wrong, see where you can improve. Whereas right now, for practical reasons, that's not something I'm able to do. But where I do track bets is if I'm testing systems, if I'm testing new things. So, for example, in the Greyhounds, there's a few strategies that I've been kind of working on, tweaking, that I want to perfect. And again, so that's being tracked. But because I am quite lazy and because I find that kind of stuff tedious, again, there's software that I use to do it. So, for example, Betfair Bot Manager, it tracks those bets. I put the selections in, it can simulate it. There's other software out there that does similar things. And yeah, that's kind of really what I do. And in terms of tipster services that I follow, I don't follow any tipsters that don't have a good long-term record. So my vetting process is seeing how they track their bets. So in that sense, I don't track them, but I know someone is, if that makes sense. So that's kind of, I suppose that's my thoughts on it. So that might be controversial to some people. Some people might disagree. I know that I'm not getting 100% efficiency from what I'm doing because I'm not refining it and, maybe not delving into the data as much as I should do. But there's only so much time in the day. So that's really the primary reason.
How long have you been doing this for?
As in not tracking things, or?
Yeah.
I suppose, I think with the American horse racing, probably about 3 or 4 months in, I just thought, this is a great edge. It works. Every month it's in profit. And I've kind of, I've checked, it hasn't been in profit, and every single month without fail, it is. So I kind of thought, well, I'm tracking it, but what am I tracking it for? I think some of my early data, perhaps I could do. So one thing I noticed was, like, say, short odds favorites that steam in generally, have a negative ROI. So I've avoided those. So I could get more data on it, but I just thought, it is profitable. I could be more profitable, but is the time, because for me, time is everything. Just every hour I have free to do something, you're a lucky man, Alex, to get this hour out of me. So yeah, so it's so yeah, it's just a compromise in practical terms, and that's the thing. So yeah, I would say, again, if something is going well for, let's say, 6 months or a year, any other services in future, I generally don't put that time in. So that kind of links, let's say, to your service on UFC, on MMA. Like, I know what you're doing. I know that you track everything. You're tracking the closing line. You've got a record of all the bets, and I trust, that you're honest with it. And that's why I think, well, what's the point of me doing it? because you're doing all that work yourself. So I'm just replicating it. So is there any need for me to put that time in? Because if I'm doing all that admin, I'm giving myself less time to actually put volume in and actually put bets down, and that's what I need to be doing. So that's just my way of looking at it.
Yeah. Look, I think this is, firstly, I think this is a terrible idea for someone that's starting betting. Like, this can only be done.
Yeah, I
this
agree.
should only be done by someone who is at your level or higher or whatever. I mean, personally, I couldn't do it, because I just I know that. I mean, like you said before, and I think that's a really valuable point. What's the point in tracking your bets if you're not going to actually go back and analyze them every so often or whatever it is? I actually analyze my results. I don't think you should do it too often, because then you're getting too short-term sighted or whatever. But every couple of weeks, I'll just go and have a brief look. Nothing major, but just so I can keep an eye on, like, different people that send me bets, different markets that I'm betting on with Trademate, different markets that I'm betting on the UFC. Like, I can just have a quick look, just to, I mean, I spend enough time during the week thinking about all different sorts of things. By looking at the results, I can get a general idea of, whether I should look deeper into it or whether I shouldn't. But yeah, I personally could not do what you're saying, just because I feel like psychologically, it would. I don't think I could deal with it if I was going through a downturn. If I couldn't go through my results and really try and pick out what exactly might be going wrong, or if it's just variance, or you know what I mean? Like, if I have, like, seriously, mate, at the end of the week or the month or whatever, when I go in to have a look at some of my results, doing all sorts of different things, I could say strategy A is been going really well. Strategy B's kind of been going okay. Strategy C, I think it's going really badly. And when I go and look at the results, it can literally be the exact opposite. Like, you can just form these biases in your head that strategy A is, it's going real well at the moment. You go look at the results, it's like a 1% ROI. So yeah, okay, you're winning, but you're not like you're not going incredibly well. So that's why I could never do it, because one, I know I form biases in my head with no actual figure around it. Like, I need to go look at the figure to confirm that what I'm thinking in my head. And secondly, if I go through a downturn, like, it would kind of drive me nuts to not know what strategy is letting me down, what tipster's letting me down, what one of the people that I work with who's sending me bets is letting me down, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, like, but let's say, would you say that there's a risk that you might have, like, binned something profitable too early because you're doing this kind of analysis?
No, I think if anything, because I understand variance, that I almost let it go for too long, and I just put everything. A lot of the time, I put a lot of. Probably there's been a few times where I've just put things down to variance. I mean, I've said this months and months ago, like, biggest mistakes that I've made in sports betting, and that's like putting trust in I wouldn't say in the wrong people, but just assuming that if someone is reputable out there or whatever, tipster, professional, whatever, that if they're putting something out there, that that it's profitable. So I mean, tracking my bets has allowed me to notice certain people are not as great as they say they are, etc., etc. So, did I answer your question? What was your question? Sorry.
I can't even remember. No. Basically, if you've got rid of, like, let's say, if you've sort of binned tipsters or strategies too early. But yeah, no, I mean, but actually, it is a good point. Let's say with the tracking of bets, which is really important, especially if you're starting out, is, you get these grandiose claims by tips. 50 points profit made this week, or blah blah blah. And the reality is, let's say they're tipping something at, at evens, but you can't get the price yourself like 90% of the time. So actually, if you're tracking what have you achieved compared to what they've achieved, and if they're kind of quoting best odds, or, in the case of, some services, let's say the odds have drifted and you have to cash out your bet and reback it again, is that really a fair representation of the reality of what you're betting on? So, and again, let's say, I'll give props to Alex because I know he's too modest to say it himself. But, for example, in his service, there will be official tips because they're generally available at most bookmakers and at similar prices. But there'll be some that are, really good outliers, but let's say only Australian punters will be able to get on them, or they're only available at 1 or 2 bookies with a boost. So, that's something that he does because, let's say it would be unfair to, or at least that's what he thinks. That's what I also agree. Sometimes it's a bit cheeky to count it as an official play if, most or at least half of your members can't actually do that. So I think that's a huge part of tracking bets is, how does it perform in reality compared to what they're promoting it? Because especially when all these tipsters are promoting their services, they're obviously going to, give you they're going to cherry pick and sugarcoat, the optimal results most of the time. The best possible prices. They don't. It's very rare you see tipsters who give you an average price, and that's what they're benchmarking, or that's what they're publishing in their results. So I think tracking in that sense is a great thing to do. Yeah, so don't get me wrong. Actually, no, I think it's great. I think we discussed like there were some rugby outliers, on try scorers, and I know that's something I wasn't necessarily tracking, but they were kind of massive outliers, and there's a few people who send me those. But credit to Alex because you were actually tracking these, looking at the figures. Whereas again, I'm just I'm lazy. I didn't do it. I was just gonna again, but for me again, because there were small stakes, that they're on a bookmaker that's already limited, so it was just kind of again, it wasn't a kind of high priority for me, but it was very insightful, sort of seeing what how it actually performed for you over a period of time. So I think 100%, if you're starting off, if you're at an intermediate level, look, if you're even, if you're doing well, if you're professional and, you want to have aims of being professional and you've got the time, it's really worth doing. For me, it's just a compromise. I know that I 100% agree, as in I should, but if it's a case of needing to earn that money, now it's my full-time income. If I've only got 5 or 6 hours in a day, if I'm spending 2 hours doing admin, then that's 2 hours less I've got to actually put volume down. So I in a way, I have to kind of have faith in the systems that have performed well for me for a long time. But that in itself is a risk, because if things kind of downturn, or if the market kind of behavior changes, then I haven't spent the time to actually analyze that. Whereas with yourself, if you are kind of, as a general rule, just tracking everything that you do, you're going to spot that far earlier than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting topic, mate. Yeah, I mean, obviously we differ on it, but I think the main thing is like, especially like stuff you said before about following tipsters. Like, let's just say that every time you get on a bet that a tipster puts out, and you can never get their recommended price, and you're just following their record, and you're always taking their minimum odds, then, and say they have a 5% ROI over a huge sample size, that basically means you're probably getting like a 1 or 2% ROI, or a 0, or maybe it's negative, because depending on how much smaller the minimum odds are. So yeah, maybe we can just sum up and say, like, it's like, this is not something that I wouldn't say for you. It's not like you're just, I can't be asked kind of thing. It's like you've thought about this, and you've thought, like, if you want to put this into like an investment kind of context, like you're saying that the money that you may lose from not tracking your bets is surpassed by the money that you can make because you've got more time on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. The volume I can put in that time. So I think if you kind of treat it as, you know, let's say you're paying yourself an hourly rate, you know, either to do admin or to potentially, you know, let's say I can get a couple of £100 of EV, you know, in an hour by actually placing the bets, or I look through, you know, or if I record the data, that's cost. I see it as a cost, you know, it's a time cost. Because, you know, for that purpose, but, you know, again, but I think Adam Cheng talked about this as well, right? Because I do remember when you spoke to him in the podcast, he said he doesn't necessarily track his bets in much detail. What exactly did he say? I can't remember the specifics.
He may have said that, but I remember him. I remember him saying that he doesn't do write-ups for his followers on, you know, whatever tip he puts out on the football. He doesn't say why. Essentially, he just puts out and says 1 unit on Arsenal to beat whoever, and doesn't explain why. Which, you know, to be honest, most of the tipsters that I have followed or still follow, like, I'd never really read their write-ups. Like,
it's true.
I think if you're having to read their write-ups to like get confirmation that you think it's a good bet, then I think you're not really you don't have full trust in them anyway. Like, I don't think, you know, I could convince you to bet on anything, mate, to be honest, like with a nice write-up. Anyone could. But,
mate, I don't read any of your write-ups on UFC. I literally,
and I fucking hate doing them because I feel like no one listens. I feel like
it could be like
something that I feel like it's something you have to do because everyone basically
it's kind of part of the process. I mean, even like I was for the Euros bet, I started doing all these detailed write-ups, and probably for about 2/3 of the way through, and then I thought, no one's bloody reading these. No one actually cares. But the reason I was doing it in the beginning was kind of like, if there was a losing bet, I could look back and think, if I went over, or if anyone read the write-up, there is a solid argument for why I'm posting this as a tip. So even if it loses, people could look at it and think, okay, no, it was there was a rationale for it. But yeah, again, at the end of the day, you know, you do kind of skip it. So for me, again, like, you know, horse racing, golf, UFC, they're not sports I follow. I'm not that interested in this because I haven't got the passion for those sports, but I've got trust in, you know, who's doing the tips. I know that, you know, you've done the research, you're watching the videos, you're going through all of that. And, you know, occasionally I'll read one because it'll be interesting, and you know, just to see how someone, I think when I first start following tipsters, I like to see how they write, because as a writer myself, it's just interesting to pick up, again, let's say the language they use, how they structure it. I learn, let's say, how I should research my own bets by how other people write up theirs. So I think that is a useful exercise, at least initially, for myself. But maybe, you know, there's people listening to this who love the actual write-ups. There are services out there where I don't necessarily bet straight on the tips, but I like their write-ups. Maybe I can give a shout out to, you know, We Love Betting, you know, their service, because actually that gives interesting angles for trading. So sometimes you can use these write-ups, you know, in a different kind of way as well. But yeah, I'm rambling.
So happy you haven't. I'm so happy you haven't read some of my write-ups, mate. I read them afterwards. Sometimes I'm like, linguistically, if I was reading this, I would think this guy could possibly have some kind of mental retardation, because
you're Australian. Well. We know you guys can't speak English properly.
So. I couldn't agree more. Like, I look at my write-ups, because essentially what I do after I've done research on a fight is I will go into my Excel spreadsheet and like write down exactly how I think the fight will go, and it's just me and my thoughts. So like, I basically just copy and paste that into my reasoning for a bit. And to people, like, if they've got no idea about betting or UFC, they must read it and go, what the hell is this bloke writing about? But I mean, I've thought about just saying I'm not going to do it anymore, but I'll just keep it going for a bit longer until people believe that I'm actually good at this.
I suppose you could just do a week where you do no write-ups and see if anyone messages to say, where's the write-ups gone?
Yeah,
And if no one says anything, then yeah, you can tell who's reading it.
It's a good idea, mate. All right, last topic for today. We're going to talk about staking. We've already gone pretty long, so hopefully this doesn't. Hopefully this isn't too long for everyone. But I mean, we're just, we just talk, mate, and it just flows. Yeah, we ramble on a little bit, but deal with it. I say. Staking.
You're not paying for it, so
yeah. I mean, staking, huge topic. We could talk about this for hours and hours, but yeah. I think this is something that you wanted to talk about, mate. So maybe, maybe you can make it a bit more specific, and we can go from there.
Yeah. So actually, I suppose related to your service and maybe more general point. So I'm quite interested when, let's say, something is tipped up and someone is saying, you should be staking 1 unit, 3 units, 5 units, or max stake. I suppose how they come to that conclusion. So I suppose, yeah, let's say with your UFC bets, kind of what's your kind of criteria? How are you kind of looking to stake in that sense?
Yeah, there's no real like set formula. I would just say, I mean, most of it's just done in my head and just experience using the Kelly criterion, doing stuff like betting to win 1 unit. I mean, I know some people do flat staking too. I think it's just using all of my experience on like, I try and implement Kelly, but in a unit kind of shape, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I used to do bet to win 1 unit, but for me, it wasn't. I don't think it wasn't giving me the same. It wasn't giving me the best results betting to win 1 unit, because it really doesn't make sense to, let's just say you've got 2 different bets, both at 2 in odds. One at, let's just say, 2 in odds and one at 2.2. The 2 in odds, both bets true odds are 1.8, let's just say. So you got one that's at 2.2, one at 2, both at 1.8 true odds. It makes no sense to bet the exact same or a less amount, I would say, if you're doing betting to win 1 unit. For me, it makes no sense to bet less on the 2.2. Like, you should be, however, whatever it is, but you should be betting more on the 2.2 than the 2, because it's a much bigger edge. So that's something that I've incorporated probably in the last 2 or 3 months, is trying to do some kind of Kelly on everything that I bet. And I understand that's incredibly hard to do, but if you do know what the true odds are, or an estimation of the true odds, like I know that all of my my UFC bets that I put on, that I will never get the true odds right in terms of the closing line, but I'm always in the range. Like, people don't understand that, like, there's a huge difference between a let's just say a 10% chance of something happening, which would represent 10 in odds, and an 8% chance in something. That's like I don't even know what that is, like 13 or 12 or whatever in odds. Like, it's a 2% difference, but it's actually it's huge in terms of, and if you can, like, if you can figure that out in your head to the point where you can go, yeah, that's a 9.5% chance, or that's a 23.5% chance of happening, like, you're an absolute genius, because I cannot do that. Like, I have to give myself a range, because I cannot, because betting is about, probabilities, and probabilities that are like down to finite percentages. So it's almost impossible to do. If you come up with like an exact number, it's impossible to come up with the true odds, unless you're using some kind of model or something like that. So yeah, in terms of staking, I guess I just have I try and use a mix of Kelly. So figuring out what are the odds, using the odds and the probabilities of that happening. So if if it's something in the range of like 1.8 to 2.3, let's just say, in odds, and something around those odds, like, I'm probably, like, because it's a good chance of happening, I'm probably going to stake somewhere between 3 to 5 units. And when I say, like, this is on a scale of 1 to 5. So if you're doing a 5 unit bet, it's like basically 2% of your bankroll, let's just say. So if it's like around that range, my smallest bet would be 2 units, and it would have to be a pretty small edge to be betting 2 units. And then the bigger the edge gets, the more units I'm happy to place on it. It's pretty hard to explain, mate, but essentially it's like figuring out like how big of a chance is this of happening, and how far away are the odds from that happening. So it's essentially using Kelly criterion, but in a more dumbed down form, just because I've realized over time that betting to win 1 unit or flat staking everything, it doesn't reap the same benefits as, for me, Kelly or a variation of Kelly.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that makes a lot of sense. But do you find that, you know, realistically, you're able to put down the kind of the unit sizes you want, or are you constrained by market limits sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I've only, like, my max bet is like $750 to $1,000, so it's like, you know, most of the time it's pretty easy to get that down. So yeah, no, for me, I haven't encountered any problems as of yet, but I understand that, like, you know, for some people, or maybe for myself in the future, if my bankroll gets big enough, that, you know, that's a problem that, you know, you've got to encounter. But I think, like, I don't know, especially on this UFC MMA kind of markets, there's, the great thing is, like, even the prop markets, you can get, or at least in Australia here, you can get lots of money down. Go to the shops, like, you can get thousands down, like a bookmaker like Top Sport. I know that you can, you know, bet to win 10 grand if you bet close enough to the fight starting. So as long as my stakes don't start getting cut, like, I don't think that'll ever be a big issue.
I think that's, but yeah, that's the challenge for me again. If I was kind of, because it's really interesting what you say about, let's say, staking to win units, because essentially that's what I'm doing with my racing stuff. I've started doing that now because I kind of want to see, you know, if that kind of smooths out some of the variance, because I've noticed where, so I haven't done that. I've kind of maybe potentially sacrificed some profit. So it'd be interesting to see. But again, that's because there's kind of specific market limits. So it makes sense if you can only win 1,000, you know, on an individual bet at a shop, then if the edge is kind of similar, so let's say, you know, there's the edge on the horse is between 10-12%, you know, then I will stake a bit more aggressively to you know, to win that unit on one of the other races. But again, yeah, there's kind of pros and cons to each, and I think, like you say, you know, bankroll growth is gonna change depending on that. That's something I want to see over the next month or two. So I'm kind of experimenting with that. What, you know, let's say a couple
tracking
of shops,
it, mate?
Yeah, I will be tracking that. Yeah, to be honest, what I will be in terms of tracking it would be kind of overall take, kind of P&L for the day, and as much as possible, I will see. So I think from January, I'll you know, I'll look to refine that even more. Yeah, because it is really interesting. I think in Australia, you know, like you say, you've got kind of decent limits for a lot of things, but then yeah, eventually you reach that market cap with the staking, and even with Kelly, you know, you've got to kind of round it sometimes, you know, just so it doesn't look too obvious what you're doing. And then I don't know, in terms of what, you know, if you're using like quarter Kelly or
yeah, I mean, it's all in my head, just because I've used quarter Kelly or 30% Kelly on Trademate for so long that I understand, like, oh, I'm still here. I understand what kind of what stakes you put on various edges, and depending on your bankroll and odds too. So yeah, I mean,
there are like, because obviously we're advocates of Kelly. You know, a lot of people we speak to, a lot of people on the podcast are, you know, it is very popular for a reason. It's not necessarily a perfect system, though. You know, it's important to kind of mention, and that's why we use a kind of modified version of it. If you were to stake full Kelly, you know, you could take huge risks with your bankroll. And there are other staking systems out there. Personally, I don't use them, but you know, people use things like Fibonacci, There's a Whitaker system, that I've read about as well. There's kind of modifications on it, so it's not the kind of be all and end all. But I think in terms of what you do, what I do, it's if not simple, it's a very clear way of trying to define your edge if you're confident on what the true odds should be. But that's the key, with a lot of things, it's hard to find those true odds. But if you get to that kind of stage where you've seen lots of these markets, you generally, as long as you've got that range, right, you can have a fair idea.
It's hard to give out really any definitive advice on how to do Kelly in your head, because it's all just experience and repetitions and understanding the market. So yeah, I'm sorry if anyone listening is like, well, this is great that you're doing this, but I don't really understand how to do it. And I mean, maybe betting to win 1 unit is the easiest thing to do, but I've just noticed, I mean, yesterday was a great example of a bet on the UFC where I mean, Top Sport's taken the market down because they got the odds so wrong. But essentially there was a fighter at 2.2 as the prop market. Fighter was at 2.2 and the other fighter was at 1.6 or something like that. And essentially the odds were the wrong way around. It wasn't a mistake, an actual technical error. It was just it's all a lot of the UFC stuff's a bit automated. They just look at stats and records and stuff like that, and not the actual attribute to the fighters. So that 2.2 bet, I had the true odds at 1.6 or 1.7. In the past, I would have put, maybe let's just say bet to win $500. I would have put $400, let's just say, on it. But now I'm fuck that. That is a huge edge. I'm putting $750 on that, or my max bet, whatever that is. The amount of EV in that is it's huge. And okay, sure, it might lose, whatever. But I mean, to not max bet that, I think is, that they're the biggest edges you'll ever see. I mean, a lot of the stuff we're doing nowadays, I mean, I can't really speak for you, but we're talking about a lot of the stuff on Trademate. It's 2, 3, 4% edges. Maybe the UFC stuff, I'll find a 5 to 10% edge most of the time. If you can find I can't do the maths, but we're talking about double figures, 20, 30, 40 plus edge. Mate, you have to maximize that as best as possible.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, 100% agree. But I suppose that the thing is let's say if you're using Pinnacle or Top Sport or the exchanges, then you can do that quite aggressively. But I suppose that's where you would have to compromise on some of the soft books. If you're just hammering the shit out of one of these lines, that's kind of an instant gubbing if you win that. So I suppose that's the other thing to factor in.
Yeah. All right, mate. I think we've covered all three of them really nicely. The last thing we're going to talk about was a question that I got through on Twitter yesterday. So whenever we're doing these podcasts, I'll try and send a tweet out, and if you guys have any questions, or even if just in general you got any questions, send them through and we can get them answered eventually. Richard Walsh 7 on Twitter says, do Neel and yourself make a conscious effort to turn over your bankroll a set number of times a month, or does turnover vary greatly? You can go first, mate.
Yes, that's a really good question. Obviously, it's time dependent. Let's say in an ideal world, if you had the same amount of hours every month, I have a target of EV, so I don't necessarily try to turn over my bankroll, but I kind of want to see how much EV I'm taking. So I suppose on Trademate it tracks things like that, so I can see how much kind of turnover I've had in a month. But really, I'm more focused on what value of EV have I taken across that month, and I try and hit that target more than 10. I think that's something I've changed. I think in the beginning I was taking a lot of turnover and trying to get as much turnover as possible, but then I was taking, let's say, 2% edges. I was taking very skinny edges where actually I thought it's kind of going sideways. I'm not actually really benefiting much from doing that. So trying to actually kind of stake a bit more aggressively on higher edges. Something we talked about before, something that I suffered in my results was trying to do that with, let's say, Bet365. where, you know, again, some of the edges I was taking were far too skinny, and looking at the data, you know, it was where it was kind of costing me. So I put in a huge amount of volume and turnover over a period of, you know, 4 or 5 months, but got nowhere with it. So that kind of refined my thinking, that kind of switched my thinking to actually, well, how much EV did I actually take during that time? Because, you know, there was plenty of turnover, but ultimately no results from it. So I think that's something maybe to be careful, or maybe, you know, to consider. At least that's from my experience.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, mate. For myself, yeah, I track how much turnover I go through each week and month. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I've got like a. I, I don't have really any goals, but I know that like once I go below a certain number of turnover, that I'm not going to make enough profit to, you know, to pay the bills or whatever, and to grow my bankroll at the same time. So yeah, I've definitely got goals. The only problem I ever have with turnover sometimes is, you know, international breaks and stuff like that, where you'll just have, you know, a period of a week and a half where you'll essentially turn over nothing on football,
Yeah.
which is very annoying. Or maybe you'll get a couple of weeks where there's no UFC events or something like that. And I think, I mean, I rarely go below my market, but then, you know, if there is a time where, you know, I'm regularly going below a certain, you know, number of turnover, then maybe look at expanding and, you know, following a new service, or potentially just maximizing what I already do. And I mean, that's another great topic we could talk about, because I would love to talk about it. We're going for so long. It's just like, you know, maximizing one thing you're really good at, rather than introducing new things, like increasing your stakes on something. But then there's a whole nother set of problems there, and the fact that, yeah, you could have the biggest edge in the world, but if you increase your stakes, you know, you could just go on a terrible losing run and you've fucked your whole bankroll. But maybe that's another topic for another time, mate. But yeah, to answer Richard's question, yeah, we both make conscious efforts, I would say, to tracking our turnover and making sure that because I think a lot of people that follow a tipster, let's just say, that don't really know much about betting, and maybe they put $10 on every single one of their bets, but they pay $30 a month, let's just say, and they I don't know how many bets they get through from this tipster, but like, if you're putting $10 down on every bet, and old mate's got a 10% edge, it means essentially that you're making $1 every time you place that bet. So $30 a month, $10 a bet, you need him to put through 40 bets a month to make $10. So is it really worth it?
Yeah. And there's some tips, you know, who don't put out that many selections. But I think it's important to say, you know, I have followed services in the past. There was a horse racing service where, you know, there were some days where he was posting out like 20 selections. There was a golf service again where there were like, you know, 30 or 40 a week, and it was kind of tedious. There was a lot of turnover, but again, ultimately that I think it is important to say, you know, just turnover by itself doesn't necessarily mean results. Like, you know, the edge has to still be there. But obviously, if it's a small edge, you need a massive amount of turnover to, you know, to really generate something sizable from it. Yeah, just something to bear in mind.
Yeah. All right, mate. I think we've done a pretty good job today, mate. You enjoy that?
Yeah, no, it's nice. Nice to catch up. See you back in the hot seat.
Back in the hot seat, mate. No more Aubameyang, though. I got rid of him, mate.
Yeah, unfortunately, no funky lights, no Aubameyang. You know,
no. Well, I got rid of the what did you call it? You thought I was in the red light district at one point when I had that new lighting system. Marius wasn't too impressed, mate, because he spent a lot of money on that lighting system, and I've never used it since. So,
mate, maybe we should give it away as a prize for a viewer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Marius would enjoy that. I mean, I think he wants me to sell it and make a profit of it, or not make a profit, or at least just get some of the money back on that thing. But yeah, we'll see. Mate, you can find Neil at My Better Life on Twitter, mybetterlife.com. Fantastic website. some good articles on there to improve your betting. Anything else you want to flog, mate?
No, just I think I hit 1,000 followers the other week, and yeah,
Oh,
I was
big
quite
man.
proud of that. No, but then loads of people left me. So yeah, so if you can follow me, so I can hit that magic 1,000 number again, it will make me very happy.
That's huge, mate. That is huge. Well done, mate.
One of my proudest achievements in life, definitely.
I know. You don't even use it, mate.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm so proud. It's just like, yeah.
Maybe that's the secret. Because I feel like I would be at 1,000 followers today if people just followed me and then I didn't tweet anything. Because once I tweet so much shit, people just unfollow me. So maybe that's the strategy.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, exactly. The more you say, the more risk there is.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, which I need some help there, I need to get to that 1,000 mark and meet Neil there at @AlexVella_. Be tremendous. But thanks for listening, everyone. Fun to be doing a podcast again. I love this format. So please, if you did enjoy the format, let us know, or you didn't enjoy it, let us know, and I can maybe come up with something different. But yeah, if you did enjoy it, rate and review, subscribe, all the good stuff. And yeah, we both use Trademate Sports, the software itself. So if you're interested in how it works, just start a free week trial, and yeah, start racking up some EV, mate. Thanks very much, and we'll have to catch up soon, mate.
Yeah, cheers, Alex. Been a pleasure as always.